Welcome to the Pretty Sister Podcast. I'm your host, Callie Stoyer, and I'm so happy that you are here with us today. This is a place of belonging, of sisterhood and friendship and fun, and it's, just a pleasure to be able to spend this time with you. So thank you for being here. Today, I have a very new special friend of mine, a new neighbor that I just love and adore, Addy Squires. And she is somebody who has been teaching in my church lessons and speaking. And as I've watched her and gotten to know her, she has this intelligence that is amazing and just is a very critical thinker and has so much to offer, and I learn every time. It's like the kind of lesson that I want to go home and write down notes and send her a text and say, thank you so much for opening your mouth and sharing. And so I've been wanting to bring her on the podcast because I want you too to experience her brilliance and her light and the things that she has to offer. So the last lesson she taught, I stopped her after and I was like, can you just kind of redo that on my podcast and share all that you just, shared with us? Because it was such a wonderful take on beauty. And as this is the Pretty Sister Podcast, and I've been telling you all, you're all so pretty. And that's my belief that all of us are just wonderful and beautiful on the inside and out. And I've wanted you to understand my ideology, I guess, of the word pretty, because it means so much more than I think just the normal person might think of that word. And so when she taught this lesson, I was like, oh, this is it. This is what I want people to understand about beauty. And so I'm so happy that you said yes, to do this podcast. And I'm going to also let you just introduce yourself a little bit because we are new friends. And so I don't know I only know a glimpse about her. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thank you. I'm so grateful to get to know you, Callie. And I had a goal this year as my kids' school year started to try to get to know people better in my neighborhood. And so we've been connecting more and it's been really nice.
We've been having parties and going to girls' lunches. It's been so fun.
It's been so fun to get to know people better. My background is that I did go to law school and work as a lawyer, but then when I had my first son, I decided to stay home full time. So I've been doing that for over 16 years now. And so my passion for growing my knowledge and understanding has just been recreational. So I read books and I listen to things and I think about things. And then I've been grateful to be able to share the lessons at our church group. And I think that it's important to always be learning and growing. I'm a breast cancer survivor, so that kind of was a dip in my story that caused me to really look at my life. It really was not the most beautiful time of my life.
No, and on a side and something to look forward to, I'm hoping that another time we could talk about that in another podcast. It deserves a whole podcast on its own because she has been a valiant warrior as I've watched you. And I only know tiny bits of that. And I would love to hear more of your take on it because you've survived it brilliantly and endured it. But you've had so many brilliant things you've said about that insights that you've learned through the process that I've, again, written down and had these epiphanies like, oh, that makes so much sense. So again, her mind is wonderful, you guys. This lawyer, this thirst for knowledge. I can see that in you. And I think I just love and admire that. You guys, we can always be learning. Just know that, like reading it, accessing, developing ourselves. There's so much we can offer as we learn. And you've offered so much you may not realize that as, you've chosen to not pursue that profession and you've been mothering, which is the most important work we could ever do as women. Even though I love business and entrepreneurship and success, all of that is wonderful too. But it's great and fine when you take a season to mother because it's so important. But you have still, I just knowing that I've experienced it, I know you have been sharing and making a difference in people's lives throughout the whole 16 years beyond.
Thanks. Yeah.
Beyond your children.
Right? Yeah.
Because I've benefited from it.
Yeah. So thanks. Yeah. And so I was going to say, even though, surviving breast cancer wasn't my most beautiful physically time, it was one of the most beautiful times of my life for learning through suffering and sacrifice and all that. So, there's so much beauty in life that isn't just something shiny, but I love shiny things too, because I was a ballroom dancer. And so I put sparkles on everything. I love it all. So
I loved you because I love sparkles.
Yes.
I mean, I've got the crown right there.
Exactly. It makes life better. So yeah,
absolutely.
That's a little about me.
Okay. Well, thank you. Aren't you so glad she's on the podcast today that we can learn from her? Okay. So let's dive into it. I know you have a lot of information that you said you even studied. When she does these lessons, she studies and she reads, and then she distills it into facts and bits and pieces that just blow your mind. So go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to let you share, and then we'll just, we'll converse as we do so.
Okay, that sounds good. I think it is worth starting with the parable, even though I know it's a Christian parable, but it's a bit of wisdom. And so I think it's worth starting with the parable of the pearl of great price, because the idea is, and it comes from the book of Matthew, but it's that the man found a pearl of great price and he sold everything he had to buy that pearl. And I think that's interesting to think about as a parable to seek a thing of beauty, because a lot of parables or fables, they're very practical, and they're about living life. But this is about buying something that is so beautiful, it's more valuable than anything in the world. And I thought about that a lot. And I thought, is it worth sacrificing everything you have for something of beauty? And that's something to think about. And philosophers have thought about beauty since the dawn of time, but really it began with the Greeks. And the interesting thing about beauty is that it's very independent of what we consider to be rational. And that's interesting to think about, because we spend a lot of time, especially in today's world, of putting a really high value on rationality and facts. And we act sometimes like that's the most important thing in the world. But the Greek philosophers, they began, and it was truth, goodness, rationality. There were different categories that you cared about. And I think beauty is one of those categories that is pretty timeless. And there's not a lot of good explanations for why we care about beauty. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but we know that we do love beauty. And it's not always distilled into attraction. That's right. an aspect of it, right? And it's an important part of humanity is being attractive. And when you're young, especially attracting a mate, right? But there's so much more to beauty.
Yes.
Right?
Well, and even with those, like the Stoic philosophers and historically, beauty was much more about balance and right, like just different aspects of it and less precision, but what's the word I'm looking for when you're symmetry? Yeah, symmetry.
Yes. Yep, exactly.
So yeah, it's not the way that we on the surface level look at it now.
Right.
But like you, I do appreciate beauty. I mean, I appreciate it when I see it in other women. When people show up even to church looking beautiful or beautiful outfits, I admire them and I enjoy them and I appreciate that. And that's just one aspect, but anywhere we see it, like I am somebody who, and as most people I think are, that nature and the beauty, the seasons and the mountains that we're looking at right now and the ocean, I mean, all of it, it's amazing what is there for us to appreciate if we do. And take the time to notice. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And I think it's interesting, like you said, they began by appreciating, and I have a slide here that we could look at, but the classic ideas of beauty were symmetry, what's called the golden ratio or the golden mean, where, this sort of 2/3, 1/3 balance, and proportion. So they, their sculptures were very focused on the proportional woman or man. And some of the most famous sculptures, that you see when you travel are ideal versions of that kind of beauty. But then, like you said, people began to realize, and it took a long time actually, those ideas of beauty stuck around for a long time. But then in the 18th century, people began, and this is what I would call more of an idealist beauty, they began to recognize, symmetry is important, but what about a mountain? Like a mountain is not symmetrical, but when I stand underneath it, I know it's beautiful, right? And so that's the idea of grandeur or expression. Like that's when the expressionists came, and there's nothing more beautiful than going to see the Monets and these expressionist art, right? Where it's not symmetrical, it's not precise, but the beauty's there. And then there began to be an appreciation for aesthetics. So things that could not necessarily be seen as exact matches, but the beauty of things coordinating. And that people began to appreciate that more in the 18th century. And then honestly, with the incoming ideas of modernism and industrialization, there is beauty to architecture in these things, but in large part, people did sort of give up on caring about beauty as much as they used to, you know? And I think it's a little bit sad, but you can see why it came about, right? Like that there was an excitement about modernism and things that broke the norm. And now we see art is almost entirely broken, right? Did you hear about the banana that got sold?
No.
I mean, yeah. So it's like a statement, right? That a guy taped a banana on a frame, you know, and sold it for millions of dollars, because that's like the point. It's like there's nothing beautiful anymore, right? And some of us are like, okay, I can see it's about context for those things. But I think it's still really important to build beautiful things, like you said, to go and
to put in effort. I mean, taping a banana to a frame, that's just silly. Right. And then it just becomes a joke and silly for someone to pay millions of dollars for that.
Right.
So it's like, no, that is not what we want to, see as beauty and appreciate. And maybe I'm just not enlightened as to what that means.
Well, and we should talk about that. What does beauty mean, right? But I do appreciate people that support artists, donate to the arts, buy extra tickets to the play, buy real art instead of just, not everyone can afford to, but you can, or even make your own art with your kids. Like, make real things that are beautiful and make a little effort,
and speaking of that, there's something to making something. Just, you and I earlier this week with girlfriends in the neighborhood got together, and it was such a fun activity. One of the gals knew how to make wreaths and invited us over to make wreaths. And we made these beautiful wreaths. I mean, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think mine's beautiful.
Yours is gorgeous.
It's not symmetric.
No,
it's not perfect. I can look at it and critique it, but I made it. So it's on the door and I'm admiring it and having all the kids come and admire my work, and so proud of it. So when we take the time to create something, that process is very fulfilling.
It is. And there is so much beauty to be found. And I think that something that's interesting about the enduring aspect of beauty and why it really should be in the category of goodness and truth and these other categories like the Greeks thought, is because it's there whether we observe it or not. And that's one of the questions of the philosophy of beauty is always, they debate whether it's, subjective, like, is it just depend on the eye of the beholder, or is there an objective reality to beauty? And I think it's probably a bit of each. But one thing that's a good example of why this is true is, and there's some more slides on this, but it's really interesting to me that as society developed technology, we discovered beauty in places that we didn't even know existed. So for example, when we developed microscopes, you look under a microscope, what do you see? Oh my goodness, it's beautiful. Like the world, the microscopic world is amazing. And then we develop,
like in the ocean,
the ocean.
We go see under the ocean things
with
that we never could see before. That's interesting to think about.
Yeah. Or when we get the telescope and we look out at, we always knew stars were beautiful, but like how beautiful are the images from like the Hubble telescope, right? And the things that are out there are so beautiful. And then something that's kind of a little more cerebral to think about, but we developed computers, and now the things, the art and the beauty that we can create that's all pretend is pretty incredible.
And those sell for millions of dollars too now.
Yes.
Those digital creations, the digital art, which is amazing.
It is amazing. So there's so much beauty that we haven't even discovered. It's out there, right? Yeah. And so, it's worth thinking about, like, why is something beautiful though, I think. And that was kind of where I took my discussion then, now that we've kind of said that it's out there. Even if we don't know it, we find it. But why is something beautiful? Do you mind if I read the quote then?
Yes, do.
It's kind of a tricky quote, but it's worth sort of picking apart. There's a philosopher that I really like, and he has developed an idea of the beauty is an identity of relationship. And I'm going to read this. And he says, perception of identity relations is what causes the pleasant feeling we call beauty. Appropriately, ugliness is a relation of difference. When an object in its structure possesses any of these aesthetical categories as its properties, this means that this object possesses relations of identity, and with that, beauty. Beauty is not only present in artistic works, but everywhere where identity relations are present. Every time the reason makes an analogy, it adopts an inductive or deductive conclusion, analyzes or synthesizes, solves mathematical or logical problems, generalizes, does good deeds or loves, It experiences beauty of the same kind when it contemplates any art. Once you feel beauty, start searching for the identity right away. Be sure it is there.
Oh, I love that. And there's so much in there that
Yeah,
we need to unpack now.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
Yes, because it's one of those quotes you have to hear and then piece by piece dissect to get the meaning.
Yeah.
And you did a great job doing it. So let's do a couple chunks of that, because my mind goes, I think that's where I get excited of like this idea of beauty is the relationship of things, because so much of Pretty Sisters to me is all about the relationship. And you probably don't even know the full story of it, but it came from my, I have two older sisters, and when I was a little girl, they nicknamed me Pretty, one of them in particular. And so it's just been my nickname as this little girl. You know, it had nothing to do with beauty, but it was just their love for me as their little baby sister. Oh. She just nicknamed me Pretty. And so we grew up, and I just then reciprocated and started calling them Pretty too, because it was like, oh, girls are pretty, and that's what we call each other. And we became the Pretty Sisters. And then as we raised we grew up and had friends, and then our friends became, oh, you're a pretty sister too. And oh, this is someone I love. That meant if you love them and they're like you and this is a friend, to us, it was like, oh, she's a pretty sister. And then you just knew, oh yeah, I'm going to love her. And so that's the relationship that you feel with somebody. It wasn't at all about their looks. It was just like, oh, I love this person. I feel this friendship with them. She's a pretty sister. And that word meant so much to us that when we had kids, we were like, well, what does this word actually mean? Because we want to raise our kids as pretty sisters. So then we wrote a pledge out of what a pretty sister is. And it just kind of kept taking on this form that now we even have a podcast that we're talking about it, trying to help people understand the feeling, the relationship, and what a pretty sister is, because it's not just beauty. And so when you read that quote, I was like, that really describes what I am trying to do and what I feel about pretty, and what about, how I feel about beauty. Okay. Yeah. So give us some of your insights about it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that, I think at first it's interesting that he calls it a feeling, because I do think that it's something that you feel. It's not necessarily like a thought always. It's not a reason. You can't always give a reason, right? And that's why we can feel beauty in suffering. Like that doesn't make any sense, but like there's a feeling there, right? And so there's beauty in childbirth, like these things that aren't the most beautiful things to take a picture of.
Pretty. but yes, it is a beautiful experience. And that's something we often talk about. It's, another word that we'll use to describe those things is it's a miracle. Like the miracle of birth. It's painful, it's ugly in some ways, but it's a miracle and it's beautiful at the same time. So that juxtapositioning that occurs in these things is so interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's really, the first thing is identity, and then the second thing is the relationship. So what he does in his book is he kind of identifies two identities. So like, if we take the example of childbirth, it's about a mother and a baby come to life, right? And so those two things are two separate things. And then it's this relationship between them, that it's the mother bringing the baby to life. Or, it's like, so whenever you feel that, like what he's saying is you see the two identities, you find the relationship, and that's where the beauty is. Yeah. And so, you think about our wreaths, and it's like, there's so much to those wreaths. They are somewhat symmetrical because they're a circle shape, right? And so that shape is usually pleasing to the eye, and then you layer on it like the identity of Christmas colors, right? And you love Christmas, and the shape together make this beautiful thing. But then for us, it's that we made it with friends,
Right. When I go admire that wreath, and while I've actually, honestly, I'm embarrassed to say, but I have gone and stood outside my door and closed the door and looked at it and took a picture of it even. I'll have to post it, I guess, because I made it. And and it's not just the pride of me making it. It's the feelings of remembering that afternoon of going together and creating that. It's so much more than just looking at it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's always there in the relationship. And, the author, he talks a lot about poetry, because it's interesting that kids have an ear for poetry and they don't even know why, but it's always the relationship of the words, or the roses are red, violets are blue. Then it's just, even those words don't rhyme.
Right.
But you learn the patterns and the idea of flowers being colors, and then you connect it to how you feel about someone, So all of these relationships are there. And I think it's helpful to be able to step back from things and say, maybe I don't have a reason why I think this is beautiful, but I feel it. And then you can kind of think about your feelings of the connection, and that's where you can find maybe a reason why it's beautiful. But you don't always have to have a reason to.
Yes.
It can just be that you feel it.
So what would you say now, taking these thoughts to a woman who maybe isn't feeling beautiful or feeling down and, just with her self-worth? What would you say to her with this information?
Well,
to help her?
That's a good question, because I think all of us age. And then, like I said, I went through cancer, so I have gorgeous blonde hair now, but it was all gone. I was wearing the cancer hat and
not feeling beautiful.
Not feeling beautiful.
Not we go through that all of us at times in our life. Yes.
Yeah. I was, so, I've been there. So that's, first of all, I'm coming from a place where I completely understand how that feels. But I think that you have to believe, the beauty on the inside. I mean, you have to believe it, right? But you have to see yourself as a person with an identity, and then you have to see your connections to other people, right?
And I think that's super helpful if you will, instead of focusing on the outward until you feel it and maybe, or until it comes back, till the hair grows back or whatever, like that's kind of fleeting. But what is not is those relationships. Or sometimes I think what we have more control of more easily is the relationships. Like if you want to feel more connected and feel more beautiful, I like this idea that something you can do instead of going and putting on more makeup is to work on your relationships, and that will actually help you feel more beautiful. I think that's a fun concept, because I don't think we always think of it that way.
Right. And
we think of it as go, get your hair done and get your nails done, and that's going to make you more beautiful. And it does to some degree. But have you ever thought of it that way? Like, I'm going to focus on this relationship with my husband or my children or my friends or my neighbors, just like what we're doing as new friends. And that will help us to experience more beauty in life. And it is.
Yeah. And it's not just attraction. So I think you have to kind of separate attraction as like a category of beauty. And sometimes we treat it as the whole category.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, am I attracted to the world around me? It's an aspect, right? Yeah.
The beauty's so much more. It's so many things.
Yep, exactly. And I think as my children have had to connect with me, and me not being aware, that my children love me for so many reasons that have nothing to do with attraction, right? Like how you look to your kids is 0%, and yet that is the most beautiful relationship that you will have in your whole life.
Yes.
And it has zero connection to attraction. So you can see,
we can't discount that. No. That's something to learn from.
Exactly.
Because that's such a real relationship.
And if you don't have kids, then it's the connections that you choose in your life to have that are connections of love. That is where true beauty is.
And I think as we're choosing connections, I mean, it's no surprise to you that I'm going to say that I just love the connections we can have with our female friends. I think it's so powerful. And not that I value my relationship with my husband and with my children beyond measure. Absolutely. It's just not what this podcast is about. But I have gotten so much joy out of my friendships with women, both my old ones and my new ones. There's so much to learn and to gain from making those connections. That's such a beautiful thing. So if you're not fully embracing that or experiencing that, get to know your neighbors, get to know other women, and embrace that. And it can begin, you can begin that. And we've given a lot of tips and talked about that a lot, but just, reaching out and connecting, which maybe you as a newer person in the neighborhood, what would you say about that?
Well, I think it's hard. It's hard to be the one. And I actually remember, I don't know if you remember the first time I met you, Callie, but we sat down at church and I just turned around and introduced myself to you. And then you were like, oh yeah, I guess I should have introduced myself to you.
So you did it first.
I was new. Yeah. And I've been just, introducing myself.
Good for you.
So you have to not be afraid. But I understand it's hard. We moved here and I've seen my kids have to do this to try to make friends. And it's hard. And you know what? Sometimes the first friend you make isn't the right friend. It's just the one person that would talk to you that day. And then as things go along, or you make the mistake sometimes of thinking that someone who's nice to everyone is your friend. And you're like, oh, she's just nice to everyone, but she doesn't actually have time for this friendship. And you need to find someone who has time for friendship. So it does take work.
Yes.
I would say. But, I think if we're sticking to this analogy of beauty, it's like making a creation of something beautiful, like a work of art. It's not something that's going to happen instantly, right?
Like the Sistine Chapel
Exactly.
did not get painted overnight, or the statue of David was probably a long time in the making.
Yeah.
These things, some of these really beautiful things take a lot of effort and a lot of work that you need to put into to have the true or all of the aspects of beauty that can come from it. The fruits of that can take a lot of work.
Yeah. And as you curate your own personal space to make it a place you enjoy, you have to bring the same care to curating relationships. And you have to have, I think, self-awareness. Like I said, going back to the idea of it being a relationship between two identities, you need to know a little bit about who you are to find who's going to be another person that will be a good identity to create a relationship with. And so
not everyone's a fit.
Not everyone's a fit,
and
right?
that's okay.
Yeah,
because we do assimilate based on interests and different values that we have, and sometimes it's proximity, different ways that we will connect.
Yeah.
And not everyone is for everyone.
Yeah. And not everyone has time, someone who's busy working full time, they connect more with the people at work. And then if you're home, then you have to find someone who's willing to go for a walk or, so you have to find, and you have to be patient with that and prayerful. I also am always prayerful and try to have the Lord help me find people that need a friend too, because you want to be a friend as well as have friends. Right?
I love that, because sometimes we can get very closed into our own world, which I probably was on that day at church. And
it's just right
not
before
saying hello. But if we can be aware that other people might need a friend and might need a friendly hello, might be new. And the more we can be aware, be kind to extend that effort, extend that smile. Sometimes it's just a smile in a grocery store line. And I've had people do that for me on a day that's hard. And they've smiled and said something very simple that they would have had no clue that would have affected me. But I've had times and moments in life where it was like, that is what I needed. And I've been able to feel just like the assistance almost from the other side, from heaven, or God's love for me. And in a stranger's hello and smile. So I love if we can have open hearts to be able to be that for others, and trust that others will be there for us, and just be friendly and be kind and see the beauty in all of these things. I love it. Okay.
Well, and I would say one thing too is I heard some advice that you should be asking for help from other people, because sometimes that's actually a great way to build that connection and that relationship, is to serve each other. And I think as women, we like to sometimes do it all or feel responsible for doing it all. And yet my favorite thing is when one of my friends asks for help. And I love that opportunity to pick up, let me pick up the kids so you can go to your, go skiing or whatever, like help each other. And that builds connection too. And I think that service is an important aspect of beauty. And I feel like when I was going through cancer, or as we're heading into the Christmas season, and I'm trying to think about how I want to be purposeful in the creating a beautiful holiday, one of my first thoughts is to service. How can I help someone as a family go visit, or, I have like an aunt that's sick with cancer. Can we go clean for her? Like, I'm trying to think of these things that serve, and there's so much beauty. I mean, think about the beauty of service.
Yes.
Right. And there's nothing there that's to behold, it's not.
But so much too that comes from that, so much emotion and feelings on both sides as we serve. It's such a blessing to be able to offer service and to receive service. And you're right. As women, sometimes we don't ask for that. I've been experiencing a tremendous amount of service from my friends as I've been asking people to do these podcasts with me. And it's interesting, as you said, that's what came to mind, because I was like, well, you're serving me right now, sitting here doing this, serving, the listeners that we're trying to, uplift or give a message to that might be helpful in some way. That can be seen as service, and it's effort to do this. But for me, I've had to, I've been asking people to do this with me and take your time out of your day, out of your busy day to do it. And I appreciate that. And in some ways, if I'm honest, it is uncomfortable, or maybe, I'm asking.
Yeah.
But we're getting to know each other better as we do it. And I've been feeling a lot of love and gratitude and appreciation from my friends as they've come forward and been willing to do this, which I recognize is vulnerable in some ways. It's new in some ways for us. We're learning what we're doing, but it's fun and I appreciate it.
Yeah. And it's building. Yeah. And look, we built this relationship of we did this thing together and it makes us have a more beautiful friendship. So I think that's a great way to see it.
Try new things. I think that's really helpful. Okay. So you mentioned, it is the Christmas season. The holidays are here and there's so much beauty to behold at this time of year that I love. And let's talk about that for a little bit.
Oh, I love Christmas as well, but I am limited in my energy. And so I have to decide what kinds of things to put my energy into.
Yes.
And I think it's really, really important as we talk about beauty and truth and goodness and these categories of things that last, to recognize that beauty can be a part of this holiday. You know, I feel like sometimes we want to be so dismissive of, it's just commercial. It's just, you know, and it's like, no, there is something to putting up a beautiful Christmas tree with lights.
Yes.
There is something to choosing these colors and having these moments, but it's because it sort of sets the stage for these relationships, right? How beautiful that we get to stop what we're doing and spend time in a setting that is aesthetic and comforting to connect with the people we love. Like, I love that we do that. So throw yourself into it, right?
Yes. I love it too. I mean, I don't know if anyone else does this, but just like at nighttime when the house is quiet and people are asleep and the warm glow of the Christmas lights and, you know, are on. Yes. And because sometimes, you know, if I have to turn things off, but I'll just like pause and just look around and just like breathe it in and take it in before I'll turn things off because I love it.
I love it too.
I love it so much. And I just will stand like admiring. It's like what I do after the house has been cleaned. And then I want to just like, no one move, no one breathe. Let's just take it in. Right. But I'll do that with the Christmas decorations. And it's always sad when it's time to take it all down because it's over. But so enjoy the beauty of the season. And yeah, I love that idea of go all in and love it.
Yeah. And I don't mean to be critical of practicality because I'm a very practical person. But, you know, I saw a post yesterday where someone was like, stop giving teachers presents, just give them cash, you know, and I get it. Like, we want to be practical. We want to give people things that they can use. For my aging mother-in-law and mother, I try to give them a beauty product or something that's not going to clutter their house. So like, be thoughtful. But on the other hand, I'd hate to see Christmas just reduced to like, just giving cash, right?
Yes, right. Because it removes some of that thoughtfulness. And sometimes it's necessary.
Right.
But some of my favorite gifts are still like the really thoughtful ones. In fact, one year, my sister-in-law, Dana, who just such a good gift giver. So you know those people in your life that just nail it. Like the creativity that goes into it. So this is what she did one year. She did this, I have it framed and it's now been in my house for 20 years and I still walk by and smile and read it, but it's all the things I learned from the Stoics or whatever. Aww. And it just has this list and it's, you know, all printed and it's really cute of just all the Stoicisms, like all the little funny things we've said or taught that she's observed.
That's nice.
Our favorite things. And it's just on this plaque. And then she did this like 20 years ago. And at the time I had 3 kids because there's 3 kids in the picture. So I had these 3 little babies or young toddler age kids. And she took them with me not knowing, you know, in advance back in the day when we went to like get photos done.
Yeah.
I mean that I guess
JCPenney.
Yes. I mean people still do it now, but not as much because we have our cameras or our phones. We have so many pictures everywhere. But she took my kids to a studio and had them photographed with a lot of these favorite things. So like I love popcorn, or it had like a piece of Tiffany's jewelry that my little daughter was wearing, or one's holding like Diet Coke and someone has licorice in their hands. Like all of my favorite things that are listed in it and are in this picture with my kids. She didn't get everything, but like lots of little things. So I have this picture and one frame and then the written thing next to it. So I have this set of pictures. How cute is that?
I can't believe the thoughtfulness. That is amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
And she kind of nails it. Every year she does something like that. And I don't want to intimidate you. You don't have to come up with that. Although that's a great idea. Steal it. Take it. If you have someone in your life you want to go to that effort for. And actually it wouldn't be that much effort now because you just do it with your camera. Anyway, such a thoughtful gift and something I treasure that's on my wall.
I love that.
I'll show you when we're done.
That is amazing. Wow. I love that. And like that was something, you know, just talking about gifting, it's meaningful. And I also think that toys and games and stuff, all that's fun and meaningful, but on some of the people that you really care about, to take a minute and think of something. I do calendars I do the little desktop calendars for the grandparents, because they love nothing more than to see the kids every day. And
those are so fun.
An hour on your computer, and you know, it comes in the mail. And so
thank goodness for technology, for making such thoughtful gifts become accessible and easy to do nowadays.
It's true.
You can just take it from your camera roll, put it in chat books is, you know, a great thing to do. So easy, so fun to create those thoughtful gifts.
And I like wrapping presents too. I know there's like gift bags or gift cards, but something about opening that and, you know, the fun of just seeing something beautiful and that there's a prize inside, you know? And so I think we need to foster that. I don't want to be overly commercial or overly materialistic. I don't want to be too worldly, but I do think that there is a time and a place for doing things that are beautiful. And I think about my kids as they anticipate these things. And I want my kids to be hardworking, and I want them to be kids that take the time each day to do their responsibilities. And if we think about celebrations, we think about it being a reward, it being, you know, and that's kind of like back to, if we could circle back to the Pearl and Great Price, you know, that there are rewards out there. There are things worth seeking. There are beautiful things worth seeking. But he had to do the work. He had to go sell everything. He had to earn some money and then sell things. There's work that you have to put in to achieve the beauty. And I think the holidays are really a symbol of that. That's why it comes at the end of the year, because we've worked hard all year. We've done those 2 terms, you know, and for our kids anyway, the term ends right before Christmas. So we're getting all those emails. So, excuse me. So I think that it's really, really nice to take a break from, and if you think about back to the idea of the identity of relations, then you have the holiday and you have regular life, and the relationship between those 2 things is the beauty, right? It's the contrast. If every day were Christmas, we wouldn't love it, right?
No, you would have to have that contrast.
This contrast, this relationship between this is my work day and then I do take a holiday. So I think we need to enjoy that, bring that beauty into your life. Don't be afraid to celebrate and step back and make it a beautiful time.
And make it a beautiful time with your family and your friends and whoever it is that you're gathering with this holiday season, knowing that it's in these relationships that beauty resides, and there's so much to harvest and to find. Hopefully you'll put a little bit more effort and thought into it and anticipate it with excitement that, you know, whether it's old or new relationships, that you can cultivate it and make something beautiful about this time and season that you get to spend together. Well, Addy, thank you so much for joining. I loved hearing it for a second time, your perspective and take on this. And as always, I learned from you and appreciate your brilliant mind and hope that we can have more conversations in the future as we get to share some of your insights, because they're wonderful. So my pretty sisters, thank you again for being here with us today. It's so wonderful to spend this time with you, and I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation, and we wish you a very Merry Christmas and happy holiday season as you go find and harvest all the beauty and relationships and the things surrounding you. You are worthy and beautiful yourself, and remember that. And until next week, stay pretty and happy holidays. Bye-bye. Bye.